This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Newbronner. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China goes where it has been before. Beijing's latest crewed mission to its space station lifts off tonight. Top North Korean military officers may be deployed with their troops in Russia to fight Ukraine. We'll be speaking with an expert about the problems of integrating the forces on the battleground. It is official, Japan's ruling coalition does not have the numbers to form a parliamentary majority. Shigeru Ishiba must now leave no stone unturned if he wants to stay on as Prime Minister. A share buyback and third quarter results that beat expectations, pushing HSBC stocks solidly into the green. Ahead on East Asia tonight, they're slimy and somewhat smelly, but eels have become a lucrative alternative for some local farmers in Cambodia as they face dwindling natural fish supplies. China has unveiled its crew of taikonauts who will take to the stars for its latest Shenzhou-19 space mission. The trio, made up of 2 men and 1 woman, set to blast off tomorrow morning at 4:27 a.m. local time from the Jiuqian Satellite Launch Center in the northwestern part of the country. Have a look here. Leading the team is Commander Chai Su-che. The 48-year-old former Air Force pilot brings experience from his participation in the Shenzhou-14 mission in 2022. Now, the other 2 crew members, Song Ling-dong and Wang Haote, are first-timers, first-time space travelers, that is. Both are born in the 1990s. Now, Wang is currently China's only female spaceflight engineer and will become the 3rd Chinese woman to be sent to space. Now, the 3 astronauts will eventually take over operations of China's Tiangong space station, or Celestial Palace in Chinese, the centerpiece of Beijing's space program. This is China's 4th manned mission for a space station and is part of China's ramped-up plans to achieve its space dream under President Xi Jinping. The team will return to Earth in late April or early May next year.
任务主要目的是与神舟18号乘组完成在轨轮换，在空间站驻留约6个月，开展空间科学与应用试验，实施航天员出舱活动及货物进出舱，进行空间站空间碎片防护装置安装、舱外载荷和舱外设备安装与回收等任务，开展科普教育和公益活动，以及空间搭载试验。
Well, officials say these efforts will boost the operating efficiency of the Tiangong space station. The incoming crew are set to complete handover procedures with the Shenzhou-18 crew currently in orbit, who will then come back to Earth next Monday.
地面准备越扎实，天上操作越从容。在空间站执行任务，随时都有可能出现各种意外的情况。 这对我们乘组的应急情况处置能力提出了很高的要求，也是我们面临的最大挑战。相信有扎实的备战训练，有坚实的地面支持，我们一定能够直面挑战，安全、顺利、稳妥地完成各项既定任务。
So what will they be doing while they're there? Well, the 3 Shenzhou-19 astronauts will focus on the theme of space investigation, covering a wide range of fields, such as space life science, space material science, and aerospace medicine. Dozens of research and technical experiments will also be conducted. Well, let's get more now by bringing in Quentin Parker, professor at Laboratory for Space Research at the University of Hong Kong. Professor Parker, nice to have you with us. Now, we've got the launch tomorrow morning, and then we also have, among other things, the mission to Mars planned for 2028, which is 2 years ahead of schedule. What do you think all this tells us about China's space technology compared to, say, other space powers like the US?
I think it shows the ambition of the Chinese space program. They've got a lot of things happening. Don't forget, they've just had a very successful mission to the moon with Chang'e 6 bringing back moon rock from the lunar far side, the first time that's ever been done. As you say, they're ahead of schedule to go back to Mars. They've already been to Mars successfully with a rover. They're going back again. They've got this amazing space station up there, and the Shenzhou-19 crew are going there to carry out a 6-month mission. So they've also got the space telescope that's planned. That's been delayed a bit, but hopefully in 2026 it'll go up. It'll be like the size of the Hubble Space Telescope in terms of the main mirror, slightly smaller, but 300 times the field of view. So incredibly effective. So these are very exciting developments from the Chinese space program. Very ambitious to become a big national focus for China.
Yeah, it certainly has accelerated under Xi Jinping with all those developments that you've spoken about. But what's behind it? What's driving China's space science development program?
I think part of it is national pride and national focus on something that everybody in China can kind of look up to, both figuratively and literally, as it were. But it's a way of developing their high-tech industries and showing to the world the prowess that they have in space missions. They've been incredibly successful with that over the last few years. You know, when you look at where they were 10 or 15 years ago to where they are now, it's extremely ambitious, but they've hit those targets, they've hit those missions. They haven't really had anything by way of failure that I can see in the last few years in particular. All very successful, all exceeding expectations. You know, the Chang'e 6 mission was actually a backup if Chang'e 5 failed, but Chang'e 5 was a great success to the near side of the moon, brought back moon rock. So they said, well, we'll rescope the backup mission to do the mission on the far side of the moon, which they did, and the first time anyone's ever done that. So they keep hitting these major milestones with success. And, you look at the new space station they have. It's the Tiangong space station. It looks very Zen-like, very clean, very uncluttered. Yeah. If you can compare that to the International Space Station.
Well, certainly it's a matter of pride, but surely the space business means much more to China. Could it be a big business, which it is? Could it be a kind of a space diplomatic tool? I don't know.
All of those things, actually, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, yes, they're looking at, developing new technologies and new materials in microgravity on board the space station, which can be spun out into commercial enterprises. I have a colleague in China, in a university in Beijing, in BIT, that's successfully looking at medical facilities and medical processes on board the Chinese space station, stuff for agricultural purposes. All sorts of things are looking at, as part of the new space economy drive. Don't forget, have all these scientific deep space exploration missions to Mars and the moon, etc. But on the space station, it's all about, doing experiments which have their own scientific purposes, but also new technologies and potential industries that can be spun out from any new developments and discoveries that they make.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you more about that because there are something like more than a dozen scientific experiments in zero gravity. Talk to me about this technology and experiments, how they are used, but particularly also civilian use. Do you see any of these things being used for the everyday man on the street? What does China hope to learn and perhaps achieve from these missions?
Well, there's 86 experiments currently. Sorry, excuse me. My phone is ringing. Apologies for that. I don't know why. Apologies. Anyway, it happens to us all. Phones can be annoying. It's a piece of technology which does depend on something in space, by the way. But in terms of, there's a huge potential for microgravity research to move forward. Drugs in space, the pharmaceutical industry, agricultural things, if you're going to go into space, going to have moon bases and Mars bases eventually, we need to know how to grow stuff in microgravity or in lower gravity. And so all of these things have a long-term aim as well as short-term potential. So everything's integrated. There's lots of different fields that are covered, from basic physics to material science, to soft matter physics, to pharmaceuticals, to medicines, as I said, that's pharmaceuticals and agricultural and biological processes. There's many different kinds of experiments which can be done in microgravity. And so, we've got a specialist engineer up there who's also got some scientific training, I believe. And so you need people that understand how to operate these complex equipments in microgravity. So that's why she's there.
I suppose some countries may have concerns about what they perceive as an opaqueness in China's science space program. But there is room for collaboration, don't you think, on not just a national, international and commercial level between countries?
Absolutely. And I think, if you look at the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs and you look at the white paper that China put out in this area a few years ago, I mean, they mention international collaboration over 40 times and cooperation over 30 times in that document. I think they are pretty serious about international collaboration. If you just look at the scientific payloads that are on Chang'e 5 and on Chang'e 6 and planned for Chang'e 7 and 8, you'll see there's a lot of different countries involved, including some European countries, in providing scientific payloads and experiments on these space platforms that China's launching. So they put out calls for international collaboration on a regular basis. They invite countries to participate. And you look at the countries, there's the recent meeting they had in the mainland a few weeks ago in Huangshan. They had a special event for countries from, I think it was... what's it called? In the Caribbean countries and South American countries being involved and being invited to join.
Yeah. Final question to you. They have been hitting their milestones even ahead of target, as you mentioned. But there's one thing certain about space. It is uncertain. What do you think could be the possible obstacles and challenges in this roadmap that China has laid out?
Yes, I mean, space is an inherently risky business. I think a few percent of space missions fail for one reason or another, from blowing up on the launch pad before you even get into space to not reaching orbit properly or other things happening. And one of the interesting characteristics of this mission was, the extra protection of putting up against space debris, because I think that's one of the things that is becoming more and more of a concern. We've got a conference in Hong Kong on this at the end of the year, is on the threat from space debris, which is getting increasingly severe. And so that's why they're putting more protection about it. So that's one of these unexpected things that could happen is, the space station gets hit by a piece of space debris, which causes a serious issue.
All right, we leave it there for now, but I do appreciate your time and your thoughts, Quentin Parker, Professor at Laboratory of Space Research at the University of Hong Kong. The South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky have agreed to hold strategic talks to jointly respond to the military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. Now, this comes as lawmakers in Seoul say top North Korean officials and soldiers are being moved to the front lines in Ukraine.
북한과 러시아 간의 병력 이동이 진행 중인 것으로 판단되며 고위급 군 장성을 포함한 일부 인원의 전선 이동 가능성을 열어두고 확인 중에 있다고 합니다.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol earlier condemned the North's troop dispatch to Russia, warning that the move is a security threat for both South Korea and the world. He further denounced what he described as illegal military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov denies this, saying the country's strategic partnership with North Korea is, quote, absolutely honest and open and does not violate international law. Amid the ratcheting tensions over Pyongyang's increased military cooperation with Russia, North Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Son-hui is heading to Moscow for talks. South Korea also reported today that the North is ready to launch another military reconnaissance satellite with technological help from Russia. For a deeper look into the cooperation dynamics on the battlefield between Russia and North Korea, we'll be speaking with Chun In-byom later this hour on East Asia Tonight. Now, he is a retired Lieutenant General and former commander of the Republic of Korea Special Forces. Coming up on East Asia Tonight, Big Four accounting firm PwC's Asian business logging lower profit after twin scandals in China and Australia led to an exodus of clients. Apart from better than expected earnings at HSBC, investors are also looking out for how its latest restructure would affect its outlook. We have a guest joining us after the break for a deep dive into this. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to East Asia Tonight. Time now for business news with Olivia Mazuki, that is. Now, Liv, HSBC shares rallying after the bank's latest results today.
That's right, Jill. Just imagine this. Within the first few hours of opening, it surged highest in the more than 6 years in London shares, and it's currently up by more than 4% in trade. And that's after the bank announced a better than expected results for the third quarter. Now, the gains tracking the advance made by its Hong Kong listed shares, which ended the day nearly 3.7% higher. HSBC posted a pre-tax profit of $8.5 billion in the 3 months to September, beating estimates. Revenue also surpassed expectations at $17 billion. Now, further lifting sentiment is a stock buyback of up to $3 billion. HSBC said the quarterly results were largely driven by revenue growth in its wealth and personal banking division. The results come a week after the bank unveiled major restructuring plans that would see its operations split geographically into Eastern and Western markets. To simplify operations, HSBC will also split into 4 key units, merging some of its commercial and investment banking businesses. The bank also announced a reshuffle in its leadership. PwC has reported a profit decline in Asian business in the past year after twin scandals caused it to lose clients in China and Australia. The Big Four accounting firm posted a drop of nearly 13% in Asia-Pacific profits for the year ended June. And the scandals in Asia-Pacific compounded a slowdown in the overall consulting market, which has also hurt growth at rivals, including Deloitte and EY. In China, PwC has been accused of helping to conceal a fraud at the collapsed property developer Evergrande. State-owned enterprises ditched PwC as their auditor after the result of the scandal. Now, last month, its license to operate was suspended for 6 months. In Australia, the firm has been in the middle of a political furore after a partner was accused of obtaining confidential information to help its international clients avoid tax. And we're also keeping track of developments in NASDAQ delisted stock Luckin Coffee. The Financial Times reports that it plans to make a comeback into the American market, but this time, China's largest coffee chain is eyeing to run cafes in the U.S. and undercut rivals with its low-price drinks. The Xiamen-based company is said to be already laying the groundwork for a U.S. launch as early as next year and currently building its supply chain and customizing its technology for the market. Luckin is expected to target cities with large numbers of Chinese students and tourists, such as New York. Now, the move comes nearly 5 years after Luckin Coffee was exposed for inflating revenues after its U.S. IPO in 2019. The fraud led to a wave of investor lawsuits and the company being booted off the main NASDAQ exchange. Chinese EV stocks on the rise today as investors expect more measures by Beijing to boost its industries. And that is in response to some export restrictions China is facing from the U.S. Hong Kong-listed shares of NIO, XPeng, BYD, they all managed to end the day on a high note. NIO there leading the charge with an almost 10% jump. Now, the advance came after China's state media reported that central government agencies will buy more electric vehicles to support the industry's development. According to Xinhua, a government directive dated 27 September said that EVs should account for at least 30% of new cars bought annually. That came days after reports that Washington was set to unveil a proposal to ban the use and the testing of Chinese and Russian technology in automated driving and vehicle communication systems. And yesterday, the U.S. Treasury Department said starting 2nd of January, some American financing of Chinese efforts to develop advanced technology will be banned, while some transactions would require companies to notify the U.S. government. The restrictions are narrowly focused on 3 sectors, which may contribute to a threat to U.S. national security. Broader markets in Greater China continued to fluctuate today as investors took out more stimulus from Beijing to support growth. And Hang Seng is the lone bright star, while Hang Seng and Shenzhen on the mainland close on the back foot. And on to other stock markets. Check the Nikkei closing nearly 0.8% higher as the yen hovers around a 3-month low, and the currency still under pressure after Japan's ruling coalition lost its parliamentary majority. And traders also digesting the latest labor data that showed that the market tightened in September, indicating sustained pressure on firms to raise wages ahead of the BOJ meeting tomorrow. And the rest of Asian Pacific, especially in East Asian markets, trading pretty mixed today, with investors looking ahead to the release of U.S. economic data and earnings report of tech titans this week. South Korean Kospi there ending slightly higher, and index heavyweight Samsung Electronics extended gains on bargain hunting, while the TAIEX in Taiwan closed about 1.2% in the red as investors await earnings from U.S. tech giants Alphabet and Apple. Now, circling back to our top business story, HSBC's third quarter results. We have a guest joining us from London. He is here to talk to us and unpack its earnings. And we have Hussein Savink, Senior Director, Banks Rating from Fitch Ratings. Thank you so much for Hussein for joining us finally. I'd like to just get you straight into it. What are the highlights of the latest HSBC earnings for you?
Sure, thanks for having me. Today, HSBC reported solid profitability in Fitch's view as the core businesses continue to perform strongly. Most noticeably, we saw wealth management perform really well as there was strong client demand and market activity in Asia. This is a result of HSBC's strategic initiatives, but also to some extent due to stimulus measures in China, which prompted market activity. In addition, HSBC reported strong income from its traditional transaction banking, and that benefited from some market volatility in FX and in the markets in the quarter. In other areas, we saw that the businesses helped offset lower net interest income as interest rates have started to fall, and that is having an impact on revenues. Credit impairment charges started to pick up slightly as there was ongoing pressures in Hong Kong commercial real estate, although this is from a low level and was within our expectations. HSBC's operating cost growth was also quite contained and, of course, is a key focus area for the group. The pre-tax profit of about $8.5 billion has beat market expectations and is quite solid and compares well with peers. The reported capital ratios are particularly also very strong, and the core capital ratio reported was above 15%, and it compares well with peers. Overall, the strong profitability and the solid capital ratios for us do underpin our A+ rating.
Hussein, what about the falling net interest margins? Is that a concern, given the easing monetary path in the US, Hong Kong, and the UK?
It's something we've been watching very closely, and of course HSBC is a banking group that has benefited quite strongly from the rising interest rates in recent years, and therefore that is also contributing to the very strong profitability. And now that we're entering a falling interest rate environment, of course we do expect net interest income to soften, but we also do not expect it to fall to the lows that we have seen over the past decade, and therefore that should continue to underpin revenue. Also, HSBC as a group have taken some measures to make sure that falling interest rates do not have a large impact on interest rates, so their sensitivity has reduced, and therefore that should also underpin their performance. Lastly, there are large structural hedges in place as a banking group that support the group from falling interest rates, and therefore, along with other revenue lines such as wealth management, that should continue to support a strong performance across the group.
Now, Hussein, these are the first earnings results we hear since George El-Hedari came on as CEO effective 2nd of September. Much attention has been drawn to his efforts to restructure the bank, especially the cost-cutting measures. In the post-earnings call, he declined to comment on cost savings. What are your views of this restructuring plan so far?
Of course, yes. It's a restructuring announcement that came about last week, and we've commented on. We believe ultimately the simplification of the group will ensure that management is having a clearer focus on its core markets and its core businesses. As you know, HSBC's home markets are Hong Kong, where it is a market leader, and the UK, where it has a strong franchise, and therefore the split up of the businesses will help HSBC concentrate on those markets. Also, HSBC have strong international connectivity, and that will be leveraged through its corporate and institutional banking division, which has been marked in this simplification, and also the wealth division, which is performing very well and has been a very strategic area for HSBC in recent years. On the cost side, we expect this could bring some cost savings over the medium term, given it's going to be more streamlined reporting. But in the short term, it could also bring some cost additions through restructuring charges. Also, the resimplification came about with a lower executive committee, so a lower number of senior management there, which could also enhance decision-making and ultimately support strategy execution, which in our view is very important for a group like HSBC.
Wow, it's very comprehensive. Thank you so much for your insight today. Hussein Savinc, Senior Director, Bank Ratings at Fitch Ratings. And that's all I have in business. Jill, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Liv. Now, coming up on East Asia tonight, we revisit one of our top stories on reports of North Korean soldiers in Russia. There are suggestions now that these soldiers may be joined by their high-ranking superiors. We'll be speaking with a retired lieutenant general from the South Korean army to see what he makes of this development. Hello, you're watching East Asia Tonight. China is preparing to send 3 astronauts into Earth's orbit overnight in the country's latest efforts to make itself a major space power. The 2 men and 1 woman on board the Shenzhou-19 mission will replace the current astronauts, also called taikonauts in China, on the Tiangong space station. China stepping up precautions along its coastal regions in the south and the east to brace for the twin impacts of storms Trami and Kong-rey. And high-ranking North Korean military officials reportedly set to join their troops on the Russian front line with Ukraine, as South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol warns of a significant security threat posed by the Pyongyang-Moscow military alliance. Well, we're staying with that story. More videos are surfacing on social media, adding to claims by countries such as Ukraine and South Korea that North Korean troops are being deployed in Russia. This Telegram clip, uploaded by a pro-Russian military outlet, purportedly shows North Korean soldiers at a military training facility near Vladivostok in Russia's far east. NATO yesterday confirmed Pyongyang's dispatch of troops to Russia and that the North's military units had been deployed to the Kursk region, and that's bordering Ukraine. Let's get more insights now. We're speaking with Chen In-bum. He is a retired lieutenant general and a former commander of South Korea's special forces. Welcome, sir, to the show. Now, as a military man, what was your reaction when you heard reports of North Korean troops and generals being deployed to fight with Russia and Ukraine?
Well, this was an alarming progress or a development in the region. But I was not surprised. It seemed that it was the logical next step to occur for this conflict.
So we've heard Mark Rutte from NATO. He's NATO's chief. Now, he's described these developments as reflecting more Russia's desperation. What is your reading of the state of Russia's military right now?
Yes, I agree. Putin needs more manpower because he's lost a lot. And now he faces a situation where he must mobilize more troops. If he mobilizes more troops, that means his popularity or support by the general population could deteriorate, which could undermine his reign or power in his country. So this kind of manpower help, especially a professional military like the North Koreans, should be a big boost for his efforts against Ukraine.
I want to come to your point about the North Koreans a bit later, but how might Russia be deploying the Koreans, the North Korean generals, as well as the troops? How might they be deploying them strategically, for one? And there are reports of 12,000 strong numbers making their way there. Is that a number that will make an impact in the war?
That's a great question. And it relies on how and when the North Koreans will be deployed. How refers to whether they will be direct combat soldiers or whether they will be combat support or just supporting the effort in other ways, like guard duty or transportation or other kinds of labor. So we don't know that yet. We think they are combat soldiers and therefore can assume that they will be deployed to combat immediately. I'm sure that they can be deployed to various areas, but right now, main focus is on the Kursk region, where the Russians are trying to push back the Ukrainian bulge that has occurred in that area. So they could be directed at that area and other areas that the Russians are in the offensive. So we'll have to see a little bit and wait and see what happens in that region. But from afar, it looks interesting, but it could affect the whole world.
Absolutely. But let's continue with how effective do you feel North Korean soldiers could be really? For example, could the move backfire? You know, they do have language differences. They're a professional army, but they're also somewhat untested. They've got different military practices. If you were to put them in the combat lines, as you suggested, would be one option. Would they really be effective?
That's a very true statement and a very good question. Actually, nobody really knows how the North Korean soldiers will act under fire, under real battlefield conditions. And I might remind you that the war in Ukraine is very different from any kind of war that we fought up until this day. It's a drone war where little machines are buzzing around, and it has a definite effect on morale as well. So it will be interesting to see how the North Koreans combat the situation. Now, having said that, if the North Koreans, because they're heavily indoctrinated and perform well, this will be a good boost for the military. But on the other hand, if they buckle under pressure and cause a lot of casualties, it would have an opposite effect on their morale. We know that armies like them can use medicines, drugs, and often alcohol to boost morale, and provide courage. So that kind of option is still there.
From what you know of North Korea and its army, what would they have received in return for these troops? And to what extent do you feel tensions have been elevated to a very, very critical level?
This is the greatest concern for the South Koreans. We know up until now, Russia has provided food, fuel, and basic technology to the North Koreans, especially money. But now there's the possibility, and there are some information that the Russians have already helped the North Koreans in their efforts to launch a satellite. Although this is called a satellite, this long-range missile is easily transferred into an intercontinental ballistic missile, as well as the satellite itself, which can provide very much needed targeting information and targeting data, which the North Koreans desperately need if they want to strike targets very far away, such as the United States. And because the United States is a close ally to the Republic of Korea, that means very bad news for us South Koreans. So here is where it directly affects the security of the Korean Peninsula.
All right, appreciate that. It's been so interesting speaking with you, sir. Chen In-bum, retired Lieutenant General and former commander of South Korea's Special Forces. Thank you. Meanwhile, South Korea's spy agency says Pyongyang has been beefing up security for its leader Kim Jong-un over fears of a possible assassination attempt. The NIS added the measures include the use of communications jamming and drone detection equipment, coinciding with a surge in Mr. Kim's public activities. So far this year, the leader has had 110 public activities, and that's an increase of 60% compared to last year. Separately, the spy agency says that the position of Kim Joo-ae, who is the daughter of Kim Jong-un, is believed to have been partially elevated due to her appearances at public events. Also noted, the country stopped using the Juche calendar, which features a system of year numbering that begins with the birth year of founder Kim Il-sung. The spy agency says this could mean that Kim Jong-un is trying to center himself as North Korea's sole leader. Well, China has confirmed that it has detained a South Korean national on suspicion of violating its anti-espionage law. Beijing says it has notified the South Korean embassy on the matter.
该韩国公民因涉嫌间谍罪被中方的有关部门依法逮捕。有关部门已向韩国驻华大使馆进行了领事通报，并为大使馆的领事官员 执行领事职务提供了必要便利。中国是法治国家，依法查处违法犯罪活动，同时保障当事人的各项合法权利。
A report suggests that the detained person is around the age of 50 and is living in Hefei in China's eastern province of Anhui. Authorities believe that the individual could have leaked semiconductor-related information to Seoul. The person in question is said to have worked in the country since 2016. The case marks the first time a South Korean national has been arrested in China since the country's revised legal framework took effect last year. China's anti-espionage law prevents the transfer of information related to national security and interests, and this prompted concerns that those working for foreign companies in China could face punishment for conducting activities that needed for everyday business. Well, Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party reportedly in discussions to form new alliances as official results confirm it lost its parliamentary majority. Now, the LDP wants to ensure that its leader and Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba can get legislation passed and also remain as the country's leader. This comes as reports say officials from the ruling coalition are looking to convene a special session of parliament to select the Prime Minister. If you recall, the LDP and its junior partner, Komeito, lost their parliamentary majority for the first time in 15 years. Mr. Ishiba's ruling coalition lost more than 60 seats, including those of 2 cabinet ministers and Komeito's leader. They only managed to secure 215 seats in the lower house, short of the 233 needed for a majority. Well, despite that, the LDP remains the top party in Japan's 465-seat lower house, and a change of government is not expected. But it could be an uphill task for the ruling coalition to seek new allies. Leaders of the ideologically similar Democratic Party for the People and Japan Innovation Party have ruled out joining.
私たちが欲しいのはポストではなくて選挙で約束した 手取りを増やす国民の懐を潤す経済政策の実現が欲しいんですよ。だからとにかく政策実現に全力を傾けますので、連立することはありません。
Coming up on East Asia tonight, Japan is set to restart a nuclear power plant it mothballed since the 2011 Fukushima disaster. Japan is restarting an atomic power plant today. It's located closest to the epicenter of the massive earthquake in 2011 that led to the Fukushima nuclear disaster. More than 13 years on, a reactor at the Onagawa nuclear power plant is being brought back online. It marks a major milestone in Japan's bid to revive the use of atomic energy. The facility incurred some damage in the 2011 quake, but its 3 reactors shut down automatically. Further south at the Fukushima Daiichi plant, tsunami waves knocked out power and backup generators, triggering a nuclear meltdown. The unit at Onagawa will be the first reactor to go online in eastern Japan, a region that has suffered from sporadic power shortages. Nuclear used to account for about 25% of Japan's electricity mix before the Fukushima disaster. It's now less than 10%. The government is keen to switch back to nuclear, a relatively clean and stable source of energy, as it courts chip makers as well as power-hungry AI data centers. China is stepping up precautions along its coastal regions in the south and the east to brace for the twin impacts of storms Trami and Kong-rey. Authorities have closed schools and evacuated hundreds of people from offshore operations to safety. More than 30,000 fishing boats have been brought back to port. Kong-rey strengthened into a typhoon overnight and is expected to further intensify as it barrels towards Taiwan. The storm is likely to make landfall on the island's central or northern region later this week. Chinese Met services are predicting that Kong-rey will also bring heavy rainstorms to financial hub Shanghai and the eastern provinces of Fujian and Zhejiang. Residents have been warned to take preventive measures in advance. Meanwhile, more intense downpours are forecast for the southern Chinese province of Hainan, with up to 300 millimeters of rain expected in some areas. Hainan is dealing with the lingering effects of Trami that's now weakened into a tropical depression. Parts of the province were inundated yesterday, forcing the temporary closure of schools and public facilities. Let's turn to Cambodia next, where fishermen are coming to terms with new realities as climate change and environmental damage disrupt their livelihoods. For centuries, the Tonle Sap Lake had been the livelihood or the lifeblood of the world's largest inland fishery. Now, many are turning to farming eels that can be exported to China and elsewhere to adapt.
Emphat once fished the waters of Tonle Sap Lake, but climate change and upstream dams have altered the lake forever. The lake, once known for its vast fish stocks, is under pressure. Dams in China and Laos are cutting the Mekong's flow. Forests around the lake are gone, and overfishing has depleted its bounty.
The Tonle Sap Lake, again, is the beating heart of the Mekong, and this beating heart has provided hundreds of thousands of tons of fish per year for people in Cambodia, all the way back to the Khmer Empire, all the way to the present day. And it does it for free, as long as the river can do what it naturally does. Unfortunately, it faces a number of threats related to upstream dams, climate change, poor land use around the lake, and all that is changing the mightiness of the Tonle Sap Lake in Cambodia.
Over 3 million people depend on the lake, but as fish stocks dwindle, they're forced to look for alternatives.
ពីអតីតពីដើមខ្ញុំអ្នកនេសាទត្រីនៅទន្លេទេដល់ការនៅទន្លេក៏វាឃើញតែលំបាកណាមួយត្រីក៏វាខ្សត់ខ្សោយហើយយើងចាស់ដែរយើងដកខ្លួនពីនឹងមក
Programs like one run by the British non-profit VSO helped fishermen farm eels.
ចង់ថានៅពេលដែលគាត់មានសមត្ថភាពអាចផលិតពូជទងនឹងបានមួយមិនត្រឹមតែគាត់ខ្លួនឯងទេដែលអាចបង្កើនចំណូលគាត់អាចជួយបង្កើនជំនាញនេះទៅដល់ក្រុមគ្រួសារគាត់អាចលក់ពូជទងនឹងទៅដល់ប្រជាជនទាំងនៅក្នុងតំបន់និងក្រៅតំបន់
For Fat, eel farming offers hope, but it's not a solution for everyone. Eels require oxygenated water and special food. They're also vulnerable to disease. Fat has lost many eels when a power cut stopped his pumps.
ពីព្រោះឥឡូវរត់ទៅទងលក់អត់បានទេឡើយសូម្បីតែកូនពូជនេះសប្ងាយនេះគឺខ្ញុំធ្វើនេះគេតេមកគ្រប់កន្លែងដើម្បីចង់បានកូនយកទៅចាប់តែខ្ញុំអត់ទាន់មានលទ្ធភាពនឹងធ្វើឲ្យគេបានព្រោះយើងនឹងចាប់ផ្ដើមអនុវត្តថ្មីអញ្ចឹងណាបាទតែថ្ងៃអនាគតប្រហែលជាវាមានទីផ្សារទូលំទូលាយពីព្រោះអាពួកហ្នឹងអាចនាំទៅចិនទៅឯណាប្រទេសក្រៅដទៃទៀត
Agriculture is costly, and many fishermen can't afford the feed or equipment.
There's no surprise that farmers are shifting to aquaculture, to raising certain types of fish, eels, crocodiles, and it's a good livelihood for them if it works. So while it can be a good idea, it's not the right idea for everyone. And the best cure for fishers around the lake is to keep that Tonle Sap Lake fishery healthy so that millions of people can continue to fish on the lake.
But for some, like Mfat, farming eels offers a lifeline in these uncertain times. The future of Tonle Sap and its communities remains uncertain. But eel farming provides a glimpse of hope amidst a changing environment.
Well, we have some sports news before we go. Manchester United is seeking a new manager after sacking Erik ten Hag yesterday. The team is reportedly in talks with Portuguese coach Ruben Amorim to become manager. Amorim is a highly regarded coach who has won 2 Portuguese league titles with Sporting. The progress of the talks over him remain unclear. Also, no clarity over whether there are other contenders for the job at Old Trafford. The Red Devils have had a dismal start in this year's English Premier League, languishing 14th in the table after 9 games. Despite being one of the world's wealthiest clubs, Manchester United has won just 1 game this season. For now, assistant manager and former striker Ruud van Nistelrooy will take over manager duties. And here's where we end East Asia tonight, but the headlines go on at CNA.Asia, Facebook, YouTube and X. Check us out there. Bye-bye.